bad logical error, Mr. Lewis, and maybe I can try to correct it very quickly.
No, answer the question.
And that is, when a person repeats the words of God from the Scriptures, those are not his personal opinions.
I didn't ask about you repeating. I asked about inferences and implications when you use the word display.
If those inferences
that's what I was talking about.
If those inferences and implications are drawn directly from the Scriptures, they have the binding authority of the Scriptures.
Very good. And when you draw something directly, you could be wrong, correct?
I certainly could. Just
okay, so therefore, once again, we're in a situation where you're offering an opinion. Even if you're functioning in goodwill, you could be in error. And if you're in error, and there's no way of telling on this earth if you're in error or not, there's no penalty for disagreeing with you, is there?
There are at least 3 logical errors in that last question that would be very difficult to address.
Excuse me, perhaps you're not aware, so I'll correct you. There can be no logical errors in a question because a question does not convey information or offer to do so. It simply requests.
I think we all know that you are making statements in your questions that do require logical foundations.
You may draw that conclusion, and I'm sure others will also. But
yes, many will.
I'll simply say that I will drop that momentarily. I think I've made my point.
Yes,
if I have more time, I'll come back and beat you to death with a little more. Okay? Now, let me ask you a question back about Matthew 16. You do agree that our Lord did promise to St. Peter the power of the keys to bind and loose?
Yes.
Excuse me?
Yes.
And he does keep his promises?
Yes.
Right? So therefore, he did receive them somewhere along the line, correct?
Matthew 18:18, yes.
Okay, fine. If you believe you know, that's all right. But it did happen?
Yes.
Okay, fine. Now, let me ask you a couple other questions, anything on the historical stuff, where you mentioned that there was... Well, let me give you another question, a quick one, which was a very specific one. You mentioned, I think, St. Ignatius of Antioch did not mention any bishop of Rome when he wrote his letters to the people in Rome?
That's true.
Okay. Now, in fact, would you write a letter to a dead man?
No.
Well, popes do die, and then sometimes they're not immediately replaced. That is correct, right?
Yes.
So it is possible that there was actually no pope in Rome because someone was dead, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Second, so therefore, the mere fact that he doesn't mention them doesn't mean that the office did not exist. It could mean several other possibilities, correct?
Not in light of the historical data, but theoretically, yes.
No, not in light of the historical data.
Right.
You know for a fact there was a pope alive on the date that letter, or a guy claiming to be pope alive, or someone claiming not to be pope alive when that letter was written?
The historical data indicates there was no monarchical...
Sorry, I was asking for a yes or no question.
You can't answer that question.
You know, in fact, the date that letter was written?
No, no one does.
Okay, fine. So therefore, you can't say what the status was of anybody.
Yes, I can.
You must let me finish a question. You can't say what the living or dead status of someone that I would attribute to be pope who was around that time, can you?
I can't deal with fantasies, no.
No. It's not a fantasy. It's certainly a historical fact. You can't say whether Pope St. Clement was alive at that time or not, right?
I'm sorry, but you're dealing with fantasies here. You're not dealing with facts.
Very good. Thank you for not answering the question, Mr. White. But that I'd avoid it too if I were caught into trap. Okay. Now let me ask you.
Only in your own mind, Mr. Lewis. Only in your own mind.
I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that Christians have held your view from the earliest days. Is that correct?
The view specific I was talking about there was the interpretation of... No, sir. The specific context was Matthew chapter 16, and the interpretation of Matthew chapter 16 was about, yes.
But correct me if I'm wrong, your view also includes that Matthew 16 does not establish a papacy, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So what you're saying is if you trace it back to the historical record you find, you would find people that have always held your position. Am I correct? That claim to be Christian, is that correct?
In regards to Matthew 16? Yes.
Okay. Now, simply because people hold your position doesn't mean it's correct, right?
That's true.
Okay, so therefore, the mere fact that people held your position or held my position means nothing with regards to truth, doesn't it?
Well, if you want to make that argument.
No, it's not if I want to make that argument. I'd like an answer.
No, I would not agree with that statement.
Okay, so the mere fact that people agree with you makes your position true?
The mere fact that my belief existed in history is very relevant to the truth claims of the position, yes.
Why would because of you existed have anything to do with relevancy? I mean, the point is simply this. There were people who believed that the world was flat. There were people who believed the earth went around the sun. Now we tend to believe the other way. You could probably trace these arguments all the way back. Does that change the truth?
In regards to the Roman Catholic claim of the papacy, yes.
It changes the truth?
Because the Roman Catholic claim of the papacy insists and asserts that the papacy is a historical institution.
We're not talking about that.
We have to talk about that.
No. I'm sorry. Excuse me. Mr. White, please answer the question.
I will only answer rational questions.
Now, Mr. White, you agreed to answer questions.
Rational questions, yes.
And you also agreed, I believe, not to interrupt me. I would really ask if you'd let me finish them. Now, I know it's difficult, but please let me finish them. I'm asking you about the views. I'm simply saying this. The fact that there are historical records that can prove that people believed what you believe does not change the truth on anything, does it? I'll go on that view.
On the issue of the papacy, it does, yes. On the issue of the papacy, it does, yes.
Excuse me. The fact that people believed X back at year 30 and 50 and 90 and 180, the fact that they believed X or the fact that they believed anti-X does not change the truth value of X or anti-X, does it?
No, sir, you're incorrect, because the truth value is determined by the dogmatic claim of the Roman Catholic Church, which states specifically, sir, that this has been the ancient and constant faith of the universal church.
Right. But the universal church is those people who believe correctly, right?
Well, if you want to define it that way, that's not the way the church defines it.
I'm asking you a question. Do you agree with that?
No.
Okay, so the universal church is that group of people who believe wrongly?
Not as Vatican I would say it,
Thank you. Mr. White, I'm asking you. I'm not asking you to quote Vatican I.
Since I quoted Vatican I, I can only answer in regards to Vatican I.
Mr. White, I have to accuse you of evasion. Let's go on a little further here. One more question, because I'm going to take the time because this guy's been dodging and eating up my time. When St. Cyprian made those statements, he was not infallible, was he?
No.
Okay, so therefore he could have been totally wrong, correct?
Yes, that's possible.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Parlier. I will simply try to be very brief, and I hope not to use up all 10 minutes, because, quite honestly, the debate has not yet been engaged, at least not from any Orthodox Roman Catholic perspective. I believe that the listeners to the debate will recognize that the arguments that have been put forth are extremely circular and lack any level of intellectual integrity. The argument from miracles, Mr. Lewis's assertion that Jesus had AB positive blood type, and the rest. I think, just to address Roman Catholics in the audience, why is it that the Roman Catholic hierarchy, the Church itself, does not use this type of argumentation? Mr. Lewis has admitted he doesn't know anyone else who has come to his particular perspectives on a number of these issues. There may be a reason for this. The reason for this, in my interaction with Roman Catholic apologists all across the United States, is that Mr. Lewis does not represent an Orthodox Roman Catholic perspective. And hence, the arguments that he utilizes are not going to be arguments that are utilized by the Vatican or by the leadership of the Roman Catholic Church today. And I would ask the Roman Catholic to ask himself the question, why is that? Why is it that the very leaders that Mr. Lewis is insisting exist today would not utilize his own arguments? It's difficult to say. Now, I pointed out that miracles have been used by all sorts of religious organizations through the years. Joseph Smith and the Mormons claim miracles, and they have the exact same types of pedigrees. Mr. Lewis talked about no photographs. Well, for example, the Islamic miracles were before there were photographs, so that hardly is a relevant statement. But the point is, the concept of the miraculous, Mr. Lewis cannot claim to have infallible knowledge of what is and what is not true miracles, and what are or